Hey everyone, welcome to my new tutorial. It's the first one of 2023 and we are going to make this cute little snow globe animation, and I really hope you will enjoy this one, and if you do, please don't forget to leave the like. It will really help my channel. And if you're new to the channel and you want to see more tutorials like this in the future, please hit that subscribe and additionally bell button if you want to get notified when I release something new. And if you're new to the world of 3D and Blender and you want to learn in the most effective and streamlined way, be sure to check out my courses. I carefully designed them to take you from beginner skill all the way to full character illustration in the shortest time possible. So if you're interested in something like that, please go check out the link in the description. Now let's jump right into empty Blender file, and first of all I will delete the cube and the light here. So let's select them, press X and delete. We'll leave the camera in place because we'll make use of that. And now let's press Shift A and we'll start with the plane. I want to start modeling the cottage first. So let's tab into the edit mode, press S and 2. We'll scale this 2 times, so 4 by 4 meters should be enough, I think. And now let's press S, then Y, and scale it down like this a little bit. I don't want it to be so uniform. And now let's press E to extrude like this. And now let's press 2 for edge select. Select these 2 edges by holding Shift, right click and subdivide. And we can now select this edge right here, press G then Z and move it up just like that. So this will serve as a base for our cottage and we'll make use of this geometry. So first of all, let's select this edge right here and hold Shift S and snap cursor to select it. Now tab out and we'll press Shift A and add a cylinder. Now let's modify the number of vertices here to something like 24. We don't need it so dense. And now tab into the edit mode, and before we scale it, let's press R, then X and 90 to rotate this 90 degrees. Let's confirm, and now let's press G, then Z and 1 and confirm. So I moved this 1 meter up because I want the origin point at the bottom there. And now we can tab out and press S to scale this down, and it will, stick to the ground there. And now press S, then Y and scale it up on the Y axis like this. And we'll use this to create a log for this hut or for this cottage. So let's go into the modifiers panel and let's add an array modifier, and let's set factor X to 0 and Z to 1. And let's increase the count to 4, something like this. And now to control the scale, we can press S and then Shift Y to leave out the y-axis, and we can just modify the diameter of the log just like that. And now another modifier, let's add a mirror modifier here, and let's use this eyedropper tool to pick the house as a center of the mirroring. So now we have something like this in place. And now we can select the hut, tab into the edit mode and select this edge in the front, hold Shift S and snap cursor to select it just like that. Now tab out and select the logs again. We'll press Alt D to duplicate, right click to release in place. And now let's hold Shift S and snap selection to cursor. And we can press R, then Z and 90 degrees. And in the mirror modifier, we can switch from X to Y. And if this overlaps like this, we can select the original logs, press S, then Y, and make them longer a little bit, just like this. Okay, now let's move on and we'll separate the roof. So select the hut, tab into the edit mode, and now go for face select by pressing 3, select these 2 faces and press P and separate selection. So now we separated this into a new object, so we can tab out, select the new roof object, and if you move it you will see there's a hole in there. We basically separated the whole geometry from the original object. So now we can tab into the new object and make some changes. So first of all, let's press A to select all, press S then Y and scale it up like this so it covers, the larger area. And to make things easier, we can just select this edge on the other side, press X and delete vertices, and we can go ahead and add a mirror modifier here, so we don't have to deal with both sides at once. And now let's select this edge on the side there, press G twice to enable sliding, and now press Alt to enable sliding out of bounds and slide this outside just like that. You can see a little bit of an overlap here, but that doesn't matter because we won't be using this mesh anyway. So let's tab out and first of all enable clipping, and we can just apply this mirror modifier. We won't be doing anything else with the roof basically. So let's now take care of the roof shields here. So tab into the edit mode, and again I will go for face select by pressing 3, select this shield, press P and separate selection. And we won't be needing the bottom part here, so let's tab out and select the new object. Now tab into the edit mode, and we can enable X-ray view, so we better see what we are doing here. And select the bottom edge, so press 2 for edge select, select this edge, press X and delete vertices. And now we can just select what's left, press F to fill. And now let's press 1 on a numpad for a front view, and we can press K to enable knife tool. Click here, press A to enable angle snap, and just do a cut like this and confirm with enter. And now we can press Ctrl R and create 2 more cuts. I'm increasing the number of cuts with the mouse wheel here, and right click to release. And now let's hold shift, select the other one as well, press Ctrl B and do a bevel like that. And we can hold shift for smaller increments, and let's do a really tiny bevel like that. Press X and delete faces, so we are creating these gaps. And now press A to select all and E to extrude, just like this. Now to make sure our normals are in place, let's press A to select all and Shift N to recalculate normals. Now tab out. And one last thing I want to separate from the original object is the bottom, is the floor. So let's select the original object, tab into the edit mode. Let's go for face select by pressing 3, select the floor, press P and enter to separate the selection again. Now we can tab out, and we can now delete the original object, the original plane. So let's press X and delete in the object mode. But you can see some of our object disappeared because we were using it as a center for our mirror modifier, so we will need to change that. So let's go and select the log, and here in the mirror modifier you can see the mirror object is empty. So let's just use the eyedropper tool, and we can use the shield here for the center of mirroring, because it shares the origin point with the original object. And now we can select the logs in the front and do the same there. And now we'll need few add-ons here to make all of this work. So let's go to the edit preferences, and here in the add-on section you will need to search for a few add-ons. So first of all, make sure you search for bool and enable bool tool, make sure it's checked right here. Then we'll search for real snow, so let's type real and you will see object real snow, make sure it's checked as well. And one last add-on will be animal, so you can see animation animal. I have it disabled right here, so let me enable it right here. And that's the third add-on we'll need. No need to download anything, you just go here in the preferences and activate them. Now let's close the preferences, they should be auto-saved. And first of all, we'll make use of the bool tool add-on, and we should have the cursor still right here. If you don't, just select the logs and hold Shift S and snap cursor to select it. Now let's press Shift A and we'll add a plane here. Now tab into the edit mode, press S to scale it down a tiny bit, maybe not so much, and now press E to extrude it like this. And we can of course scale it on X axis a little bit more, and we'll use this to cut a hole in our hut. So maybe select the bottom face as well, press G then Z and move it down. If you're not able to see through, make sure you enable the X-ray view right here. And since we created this from plane, let's press A and Shift N. Now tab out and we'll make the cut. So let's hold Shift, select the logs, and we'll hold Ctrl and hit minus on a numpad. That's what the bool tool add-on enables, and it will do all sorts of things for us. But the important thing is we have now our door cut in, and let's take care of the roof. And I won't be creating any roof per se, because I want this to be snowy scene, so I want to create snow. So instead of a roof, we'll have just a thick layer of snow there, and it will look just fine. So let's select the roof object, let's hit N to enable side panel, and let's locate the real snow add-on. I have it right here. And basically there are just two settings here, the coverage of the snow and the height. So let's set the height to something like 1. I want this to be really thick. And let's just click add snow. You might need to wait for a second, but basically it will create a layer of snow for you. And let me exit the X-ray view right here. But not only it created the snow mesh, it created the snow material as well. If it loads a little bit too long when you click on the materials, Don't worry, just wait it out. The snow material is a little bit heavy on the nodes. And one last thing I want to take care of here is the floor. So let's select it. Let's tab in and we'll create a few cuts here. So let's press Ctrl R and create like 4 cuts. That should be just fine. Press Ctrl B to bevel again. And again, very tiny bevels. Press X and delete faces. Now press A to select all and E to extrude like this. And now we can make some small adjustments. We can press 3 for face select. Select this front face, press G then Y and move it back a little bit so it like doesn't overlap here. And now let's do some bevels here. But I think there's a little bit too much of a gap here. So let's take care of these logs. Let's select them both by holding Shift. And let's press S and then Z to scale them tiny bit on a Z axis. And of course we distorted them a little bit, but I guess that's okay. And there's one more thing here in terms of modeling. Let's hold Shift and right click here to move the cursor there, and let's press Shift A and we'll add a plane. We'll create a chimney here, so tab into the edit mode, press S to scale it down and E to extrude like this. Now let's press Ctrl R to create a cut here, place it right there. Press 3 for face select, alt click here and alt E and extrude faces along normals. Let's press S to enable even scaling to create an extrusion like that. Now let's select this face right here, press S to make it smaller and then E to extrude inside. Now one more thing I want to do here is alt click this loop right here and press Shift D, right click to release and P enter to separate into a new object, and you will see why. Now I will tab out, select that new object and add snow there as well. So let's set something like 0.5 and click add snow, and they'll create this little snow coverage for the chimney. And now we can just click again until we select the separated object and press X and delete. We don't need it anymore. And the same applies for the roof. So let's click through the objects here until we select the original roof, press X and delete. No need to keep it around. And now let's hold Shift S and snap cursor to world origin. And we'll create a terrain here. So let's press Shift A and let's add a circle. Now we'll reduce the vertices to something like 24. Press tab into the edit mode and press A to select all and just scale it up until we have something like this here. And now we can press Ctrl F for face menu and choose grid fill. That will fill our circle with quads, which is what we want here. And now we can right click and subdivide if you want a little bit more dense mesh. And now let's go for edge select by pressing 2, alt click this loop and now hold Shift additionally, and let's select these other ones as well. Let's look from the front and enable proportional editing here, press G then Z and move it down, and you can adjust the proportional fall off with the mouse wheel here, and you can see how much of the faces you are affecting. So I want to create a little bump here like this, and now we can press E then Z and extrude this down tiny bit, tab out and press Ctrl 2 to add subdivision modifier like this. And now we'll add some snow coverage here as well, but before we do, let's reduce the levels in the viewport to 1, because the denser the mesh, the longer it will do the snow calculations. And let's get this back to 1 meter of height. And let's click add snow. So nice little snow patch, and we can just select the underlying object now, go back to the viewport levels 2, now hold Shift, select both of those. Let's go for a front view by pressing 1 on a numpad, press G then Z and move this down, and you can overlap this a little bit so it looks like the hut is kind of sitting in the snow there. So that's for the environment, and now Shift right click here to move the cursor, and let's press Shift A and we'll create a circle again, and let's reduce to something like 12 and tab in, press S to scale it down, press F to fill and E to extrude. We will create a small tree here, and now we can select all and press S then Shift Z to work with the thickness of the trunk. And now let's press 3 for face select, select this face right here, Shift D to duplicate, right click to release and P enter to separate again. And let's tab out, select the new object, tab in, press A to select all and make it larger. I know it's a lot of steps, but you can see I'm not doing anything new here. It's always duplicating, separating the geometry, and then using the new object. And now let's press E to extrude and S to scale. And let's press A to select all and Shift D and Z to duplicate it. Press S to make it a little bit smaller. And now let's do it again. So let's press Shift D, Z, and final one right here. Now we can add some supporting loops by pressing Ctrl R and sliding them down like this. Tab out and press Ctrl 2 to add subdivision modifier, and we have a small tree. Of course, something like this can happen when you add subdivision modifier, so you can always go back and try to, you know, position your meshes a little bit better. Let me do this with X-ray view on, and let's just place them lower. You can press L, hovering over some object, to select linked. And let's do something like this, and then maybe make it more narrow, larger, you know, play with the shape. Okay, so that's the tree, and maybe let's make it even larger in comparison with the trunk, just like that. And now we can tab out, and now let's add some bevels so we have a nicer, smoother, you know, rounded shapes. So for example, let's select these logs here, and in the modifiers panel, let's go ahead and add a bevel modifier like this. Let's scroll down and let's modify the amount, and you can see it's a little bit protruded like this. That means that I haven't applied the scale of the logs before, which is very important when you're working with something like bevel modifier. So if you press Ctrl A, you can apply the scale, but here it will prompt you to create new object data and apply transformation, and I will confirm this. And this is because these logs right here were linked duplicates of this, and I want to keep it that way. So let's select these. First of all, let's press Ctrl A and apply scale as well. We need the same scale there. And now hold Shift, select the original logs, press Ctrl L and link object data. That will make them synchronized again. So if you go inside and do changes, it will apply to both objects. And now we can go back to the bevel modifier. So let's reduce the amount to something like this. Let's add more segments, so we have that nice rounded shape there. Let's go into the geometry and switch this to arc. Disable clamp overlaps so we can see potential problem, and enable harden normals in the shading. Don't worry about this warning right here, we'll take care of this. Now let's select the rest of the objects we want the bevel to be applied to. So let's select the floor, hold Shift and select the rest of the logs, the shields, the chimney and the trunk here. I think that's all of them. And now hold Shift and select the logs as last. Now let's scroll down to the bevel modifier and choose copy to select it here. That will transfer that bevel modifier to the other objects as well. And now we can right click and choose shade auto smooth and increase this all the way to 180 degrees, so the bevel modifier can take care of the shading for us. Now we can see this is a little bit drowned, you know, in that snow, so we can press G then Z and move it up tiny bit. So that's the first thing I want to do. And this is why I disabled clamp overlap, to see potential issues here. And you can see there are some of them after the Boolean cut. And basically there are overlapping vertices here when we use the array modifier. So we can fix this by just nudging this offset tiny bit on the z-axis. Something like 1.001 should be enough to, you know, make the gap and separate these vertices and clean up the mesh. So that's for the bevels. And while I was rotating this, I noticed we don't have the shield on the other side. So let's just add a mirror modifier here as well and enable y-axis mirroring. And now let's shade this smooth. And we need to move this down. So few of the fixes like that, and we should be good with our scene. Now let's duplicate some of these trees around the scene. So first of all, I will select the tree, hold Shift and then the trunk, press Ctrl P and parent to object. And now let's hold Alt D and Shift Z to duplicate and move on the X and Y axis like this, maybe a little bit closer here. And now let's do one more on the side here. And now we can select the trunk and make one of these smaller and maybe one of these larger, so we have some variation there. And I don't like the chimney is a little bit too low. Now we shifted it down, so let's go into the edit mode. I will enable X-ray view and just move it up like this in the edit mode. So now I really like the result. So first of all, let's parent some of these things so we can work with them. I will just drag selection around all the house objects like this, and then hold shift and select the floor, Ctrl P and parent everything to the object and keep transformation. This way we can just move the house by just moving the floor. And yeah, that's basically it. Now let's go for camera view by hitting 0 on a numpad. Let's select the camera by clicking the frame, press G then Z twice and move it out like this. And let's go to the output settings and switch resolution to something like 1600 to 1200. So we have like a larger viewport here, and let's move it around like this. Now to better position the camera, we can just go ahead and enable lock camera to view here in the view section. Just check the camera to view right here, and now you can use your viewport controls to place the camera like this, but don't forget to turn it off when you're done. So I really like this, and now I want to make this house a little bit more cartoonish, and I want to use lattice modifier for that. But before we do, we kind of need to take care of the mesh, because right now if I enable wireframe overlay right here, you can see these logs have these long faces and those would not deform very good. So let's select those, tab in, and let's press Ctrl R and create a few cuts like this. I don't know, like 5 or 4. Right click to release, and since we have array modifier in place, it gets transferred to all of those and on the duplicated object as well. And now we can tab out, select the chimney, tab in, press Ctrl R, create 2 cuts right here and 1 on both sides like this, so it's a little bit more subdivided. And I will leave, you know, the shields as they are. They should be okay for what I'm going to do right here. So let's go ahead and turn off the wireframe overlay, and let's select the floor, hold shift S, snap cursor to world origin, and let's press shift A and we'll add a lattice object. Now let's enable X-ray view and we'll position it better around our house. So let's press G then Z and move it here in the middle. And now let's scale it up like this. Let's look from the top by pressing 7 on a numpad. And this is quite okay, I guess. So let's make it even larger, so we catch the roof as well, and of course the chimney. Maybe make it smaller on the Z-axis. Yeah, something like this should be okay. Let's look from the side. Okay, and now go to the lattice settings right here, and let's set these to 4, so we have more divisions right there. Now let's disable the X-ray view, and we'll try to have some fun now with the shape of the house, because I want this to be cartoonish, you know, to be really cute and distorted. And the lattice modifier is really great for that, but I'm not sure I want to deal with the Boolean modifier here. So I just want to select these logs in the front, make them single user and detach them from the original object now that they are subdivided. So let's press Ctrl A and apply scale. It won't do anything, but it will prompt us to separate the object, and that's very handy. And now we can just go into the modifiers panel, and first of all apply the array, the mirror modifier, and the Boolean as well. And I'm pressing Ctrl A, hovering over these modifiers, and we can leave bevel in place, no need to remove that. And now we can just select the Boolean object, press X and delete. We don't need it anymore. This is now, you know, a custom mesh. And we can start right here. We can add new modifier, and we can add lattice modifier, use the eyedropper and choose the lattice object. And now we can select all of these other house objects, and we can help ourselves by selecting the roof, holding shift and hitting right bracket on a keyboard to expand the selection to all of the parent objects. And now let's hold shift, select the logs in the front that have the lattice modifier on them, and just transfer this on the others, copy to select it. And now if you select the lattice and start moving things around, you will see you are distorting the object, and this can be animated as well, even though with the workaround. That's why I activated the animal. And the only way you could do something like this, I think, is with the bones, but then again it will be really tedious to create a rig with the bones. And this lattice modifier is really easy way how to create nice distortions, you know, to create like this kind of cartoonish distorted house. So let's select, for example, this row right here and start compressing it. So press S to scale it down and do something like this. And of course you can drag the chimney out a little bit. If you select these two, press G then Z and move it out. And then, you know, you can move it to the side if you wish. And with these as well, you know, to make it really protruded and cartoonish. And now we can select the bottom, press S to scale it up to make it a little bit more bulky at the bottom, maybe press G to shift it down a little bit. You know, all sorts of things you can do with this kind of modifier. And then we can just select all of this and press G then Z and make it a little bit taller if you want, you know. So you can really change the shape of what you have modeled by just using this modifier. So I really like this, and you can see how this looks really different from what we had before. You know, it's more interesting, more fun, more cartoonish. So I'm really okay with this. And now we can create a simple animation here. So let's expand our timeline here. And let's select the lattice modifier. And first of all, I want this to be like 140 frames. I don't want this to be too long because the render would take too long. So let's go to the output settings and change frame rate to 30 FPS. And now we are ready to start animating. We are on the frame 1 here. And we can locate our last add-on animal right here in the animate section of the add-ons. And you can see it's really simple. There are a few options here. And basically we need to use this to animate the points of our lattice objects. This is something that's not available by default. So let's just go into the edit mode here. And we can select all here and choose points and their location. And we can choose to key selected only. And with all of them selected, make sure you selected them with A. Just choose insert key. And you will see it created this keyframe. So now this shape is saved into these keyframes here. It's a little bit harder to work with this kind of animation because if we look at the graph editor with Control Tab, you can see a lot of tracks here, a lot of points. They all have their X and Y and Z tracks. So it's a little bit unwieldy at times, but then again, really simple way how to make these deformation animations real quick. So I think that's a great trade-off. So let's try to do something, and what I wanted to create is this kind of like a jumpy animation in the style of like 30s and 40s cartoons, if you remember them, the old Disney cartoons, where all of these characters and objects would have these idling animation, this little, you know, jumpy movement. And I want to replicate that for the snow globe. I thought it would be, you know, a cute thing to do. So let's try to do something like that. And basically the movement will be very soft here. So let's move to like frame 60. So it's like a sudden movement downwards. And we can just select these top 2 rows and press G then Z and like move them down tiny bit. And then the top one a little bit. Nothing too pronounced. And maybe these 2 as well. So we kind of lower the chimney as well like this. And now let's just press A to select all again and insert key. And now we have this animation right there. So I think this is really cute, and imagine a lot of things you can do here with this stuff. So, you know, go wild, try to do something interesting. And now we can just tab out and duplicate this first set of keyframes. So let's press Shift D and move them to frame, let's say 20. And now we can select these 2 and press Shift D and move them like 6 frames away. And now let's press Shift R and replicate that towards the end of the scene. So we have something like this here. But now with the snow in place and with all of the dense mesh, you can see we have really slow FPS. So to really see your animation timing in the playback section, instead of play every frame, choose frame dropping. They'll make this a little bit choppy, but at the same time, it will preview, you know, at the regular speed of 30 FPS, even though your scene FPS is lower. So we have like this small jumpy movement here, and I want to do the same for the trees, but there I want them to kind of like move from side to side as well. So first of all, let's select the trunk. Let's go to the frame 1, and here let's go to the item menu and let's right click the Y rotation and choose insert single keyframe. We don't need any more keyframes right there. Oh, and it created on the frame 6, so let's press G then X and move it to the frame 1. And now I'll press Ctrl Tab to bring up our graph editor, and we can see our rotation right here. And here in the modifiers, I will just add a noise modifier. And now we just need to, you know, modify this because it would be quite erratic. So let's reduce the strength first of all, and then let's increase the scale. So we have something like this. And I think scale of 20 should be okay. And the strength can be even lower. And you can see it like bumping from side to side. But I want to connect them because I want this animation to be looping. So let's restrict the frame range. First of all, I will set start to 1 and 140 for the end. And here we'll choose 15 frames from blend in and blend out, and that will create this kind of connection. And I think this is quite okay, and we can of course play with the offset so we can find like a better animation here or something like this maybe. Okay, like that. And now we can select all of these other trunks and hold shift, select this one as last, press Ctrl L and link animation data so they will all do the same movement. Now sometimes you might want to differentiate the movement so it's not so uniform. So in that case you would now basically apply, you know, and separate them from each other, and then try to modify, like for example the offset for some of these or something like that. But let's just move on and let's play with the trees themselves. So let's select the top of the tree, let's go to the frame 1 and we'll insert the Z scale. So right click on a Z scale and insert single keyframe. And now we'll try to, you know, copy the timing of the house here. So we have this keyframe right here, and you can see the scale numbers on the y-axis. And if you duplicate this and go, for example, let's go to the frame 6 because that's what we want to do, and we want to go down, we want to compress this down. So let's go tiny bit. Now we can select both of these frames and press period on a numpad to kind of close in a little bit. And now you can see this is more like it because we need to be moving between 0 and 1. That's the scale. So if you go to the frame 6 and you would move to the frame 0, you would see you flatten this down. So we kind of need only this range right here, something like 0.1 of the scale. So yeah, let's move it to like 0.9. That should be enough. And that's basically all we need to do here. Now let's press Ctrl Tab to go back to the keyframes view. Select the first one, press Shift D, and we'll replicate the timing of the house. So let's go to the frame 20. Now let's select these two and press Shift D and go like this. So we are ending on the frame 40. And now let's just hold Shift and press R to replicate this action. And now we have a dancing tree here in the rhythm with the house. And let's just select these three tops with this as last, press Ctrl L and link animation data. And now we have something like this. Okay, I quite like it. And one last thing we need to do is to do the actual snow globe and some snow. So first of all, let's press Shift A and we'll add a mesh and the round cube. If you don't see this option here, just go to Edit, Preferences and search for Extra Objects, and you should see option for curves and mesh as well. Just activate them and now you should see these options right here. Let's choose round cube and switch to quad sphere and reduce to something like 4. And we'll move this down, make this a little bit smaller and call this snowball. Or let's call it snowflake. That's a better one. And we'll just save it for later. And now let's press Shift A and we'll add another round cube. Now let's go back to the 8 subdivisions here and let's make this larger. So go into the edit mode and let's make it larger like this. And additionally, we can press 1 for a front view and start moving it up so we can better see how it will cross with the terrain. And I like something like this. So let's press K for knife tool, start your cutting right here, press C then A to enable cut through and snapping to the angle. Let's confirm with the mouse and enter to confirm the cut. Now with the X-ray view we can see which vertices we can delete, and we have a nice globe like this. Now let's tab out and we'll press Ctrl 1 to add subdivision modifier, maybe even Ctrl 2 so it's smooth, because that will show nicely with all the reflections. And I want to see through during our process, so let's go here and in the viewport display let's switch this to wire. And the next thing I want to do is to go to the modifiers panel and add solidify modifier right here. And you will see it's not so pronounced, but if you start to play with the thickness, you will see you are increasing the thickness of the object. And now I want to right click and choose auto smooth, and let's set 30 degrees. That will take care of the smoothing towards the edge. So that's our globe, and now we'll need to add some actual snow. So we can just press Shift D to duplicate this, and we can remove the solidify modifier, tab into the edit mode, go for a front view by pressing 1, go into the X-ray view and just selecting all of these vertices, press X and delete. And now we have something like this here, and we can press Alt S to scale it inside tiny bit. And that will be our, snow emission plane. So let's tab out, and we don't need any subdivision on this at all. So let's toggle the X-ray again, and I want to go ahead and switch this back to the textured view because I want to be able to see the particles in the viewport. And now let's go to the particle settings and let's create some snow. So first of all, let's create a particle system. And first thing I want to do is to go field weights and reduce the gravity to 0. And now in the velocity, I will set normal to 0. And let's set Z to something like 1 or maybe something smaller, 0.8. We'll see. Really depends on how this will look in the scene. And now if we play back the animation, oh, they are going up, so we need to go minus 0.8, so they're going down. And the reason I did this is I don't want to have any acceleration there. I want them to be, going at a constant speed because I want to loop this animation. So let's see how that looks. It's quite okay, but the lifetime is too short. Isn't that true for everyone? So let's go 140 and see how far they will travel now. Okay, that's quite okay. They basically go all the way down, and of course we don't need so many of them, so let's go something like 500, maybe even lower. Yeah, definitely lower, something like 150. Okay, that's totally fine. And now let's scroll down, and in the render section we'll switch halo to object and choose our snowflake right here. And now play with the scale right here, and let's go with the randomness all the way to 1, and let's fine-tune the scale. And don't forget to go and right click shade smooth the snowflake so they're all smooth and nice. And now in the render section, don't forget to uncheck show emitter. That will basically make sure it's not visible in your render. So now we have some snow in place, and I really like this. So what we can do to loop this is to create another particle emission, the same as before, and then shift it 140 frames before this animation begins. So let's do that right now, and I think we took care of everything right here. Just make sure you have all the settings you want, because then it's a little tedious to adjust 2 particle emissions at once. But I think this is okay, and you can see these are particle settings 003. That's important to note here, because right now we'll create a new particle system and choose that 003 particle settings from here, and then duplicate it. So we created 005. Sometimes this can be a little bit confusing, that there is some name right here and some name right here. Basically, these are the names for the particle system in the stack, and these are the names of the actual data of the particle system. So just be careful you are using the right data, and you might have these numbers a little bit different because I think the real snow uses particle system. So depending on how many times you used it, there might be more particle systems here. So just make sure you read out the name of the particle settings here in the first one, and then when you duplicate it, you just select it and then duplicate. And now if you have it duplicated, we can just set the frame start to -140 and frame end to 1 and leave the lifetime 140. And now let's open the cache options and we'll bake all dynamics here. This can take a while depending on your CPU. Okay, that's the bake. And you can see on the frame 1 we already have a snow, and it should be the same snow that's on the frame 140. So let's just play back if the loop works. I think it's a little bit jumpy, so maybe we need to play with the seed as well. So let's first delete all bakes and let's select the first particle system, and you know, let's set the seed to something like 1, so there is actual some seed. And for the second one, let's do the same thing. And with the first particle system, I can see I left the end of emission at 200, so let's make it 140 as well. And now let's try to bake it all. Okay, and let's try to play back our loop. Okay, and this is now looping correctly. So we have some nice looping snow, we have some dancing trees and dancing hut. So the only thing left is, you know, to add some materials and to make it look nice, to give it some beautiful lighting. So let's go to the render settings, and first of all, for the EV preview I will enable, you know, ambient occlusion, bloom, some reflections and refraction, so we can see what we are doing, but the final will be cycles anyway. So let me switch to GPU and enable some denoising, and I will use optics denoising for, you know, some faster preview renders, and something really small for samples like 64. And then, you know, when I'm satisfied with the animation, I will ramp up the samples and, you know, maybe use another denoiser and stuff like that. So yeah, and in the performance I will use lower value here for the tiling, and basically that's it. So let's hold Z and choose material preview, and let's press Shift A and let's add a plane. Let's scale it up and let's move this down like here, so we have some background. Let's go for a camera view, and with addition of the globe we need to reposition our camera. So let's press G then Z, move it up tiny bit and maybe a little bit away, and then make this larger. So the snow object should have already the material by the snow add-on. So let's select the trees and give them the snow as well. And you can see they're linked, so it gets applied to all of them. Let me move this because it's overlapping a little bit. And now let's make sure our snowflake object has the same material. And now we'll just need to take care of some of the wooden material, and let's just find some nice color, make it a little bit darker, maybe more towards red, so it's a little bit stylized like this. Okay, and you know, let's play with the roughness a little bit. Let's increase it, and let's play with the bevel amount as well, so it's a little bit more pronounced. And now let's choose the material for the sides, for the floor as well. And now here at the top we can choose the same material but duplicate it, and you know, increase the brightness a little bit like this, and then maybe choose it for the floor as well, so there is a little bit of the differentiation. And now let's select the chimney, and let's, you know, choose something like this, so it looks like a stone maybe, and then the wooden material for the trunk as well. Now for the background, we'll go for something, you know, violet like this. Let's go for a camera view. Let's press Ctrl B and limit our render preview just for the camera bounce. And yeah, maybe we can give the same material to the bottom of the globe as well. And now let's select the globe itself. First of all, I will go here and, you know, switch the wire back to the textured so we can see the object and create a glass material. And now let's scroll down, and in the viewport display, that's only for the purpose to see this in Eevee, we'll enable screen space refraction, and then, you know, go with transmission all the way to 1, set roughness to something like 0.01, really something subtle, and set the IOR to something lower like 1.1. I don't want this to be so distorted. And now we'll need some light, of course, so let's press Shift A and we'll add an area light. And let's press G then Z, move it up, and I will hold period on a keyboard and switch to 3D cursor, make this a little bit larger, and let's switch from square to disc, and let's set something really strong like 750 or maybe even 1500, we'll see about that. And now let's press R then X and 90 degrees, so we are able to rotate it all the way here. Now press R then Z and position it better in the scene, and G then Z to bring it up a little bit. So we have this light, you know, from the side, and now if you look at the render preview, we have this nice lighting from the side, and it creates a nice reflection on the globe as well. Maybe we can make this a little bit larger so it's more soft light, and maybe give this like a blue tint, and then press Shift D, R, Z, and duplicate this towards the other side. Find some nice placement like this, and maybe make it a warmer light, or maybe not so much. Yeah, let's leave this cold. And now let's press Shift D to duplicate this, and Alt G and Alt R to reset it, both rotation and position. Now let's look from the top and place it here, and I will explain just in a second. I want to shine a light on the background, but at the same time I need to get the light in the snow globe as well. And right now it kind of blocks a lot of light here, so we can take advantage of the area light and just bring it up like this, and it will actually shine some light here on the inside as well as on the outside. And let's bring it up to something like 1500 and make it a warm light here, and it will create this nice effect in the background, and I really like this. And now we have the cursor in the middle, so we can just press Shift A and add a point light here, and press G then Z and bring it up in the house towards the roof, and make it really strong, something like 500, and they'll create this kind of light and make it really warm. So there's a little bit of that contrast here, and we got these nice reflections on the trees, maybe not so towards the red side, maybe something like this. Okay, and right now we can just go to the world settings and increase the world lighting and play with the color just like that. Now let's go for a camera view, and in the render settings we can scroll down to the color management and enable high contrast setting and play with exposure, and you should have a result like this. Now don't worry about this particle emitter. If you don't want to see it in your viewport previews, you can just select the object and give it a new material, and now you can switch principled to transparent. And basically in the Eevee you need to additionally choose blend mode to alpha clip, and it will disappear from your scene and in the cycles as well. So that's a way how to get rid of that. So that's our little snow globe scene, and I will now go ahead and render it. You can go to the output settings, choose your folder for output, and then either render PNG sequence or switch this to FFmpeg, you know, with some MP4 encoding, choose your folder and just hit render and render animation or Ctrl F12 and wait it out, you know, see your preview animation, maybe even go lower on the sampling like 32 and, you know, smaller resolution like 800 by 600 to see your preview, to see your timing, whether you like it, whether you like your lighting in the end. And then when you're satisfied with your animation, just ramp up these settings and leave it out, you know, to render. So yeah, that's it for the snow globe animation, I guess. I really hope you enjoyed this one. It was a handful, but if you did, please leave that like. It will really help me and my channel. And again, if you're new to the channel, please hit that subscribe. Thank you all for watching and have a wonderful day.
Three.